In an unprecedented move that has reverberated through military circles around the globe, Sweden has unveiled a cutting-edge fighter jet that has left Russia and much of the world in absolute shock, defying expectations and instantly altering the balance of air power in Europe. This new aircraft, known as the JS-39E Gripen, an upgraded beast of a machine from the Saab Defense Company, has not only stunned global defense analysts with its performance specs, but has also sent an unmistakable message to adversaries. Sweden is no longer just a quiet Nordic observer, but a fierce aerial force to be reckoned with. Emerging from a doctrine of stealth, agility, precision, and cost-effective deterrence, the JS-39E is the embodiment of modern aerial combat. And what makes it all the more remarkable is how such a relatively small, neutral nation has created a machine that can challenge even the most elite Russian aircraft like the Su-35, Su-57, and potentially threaten the very concept of Russian air dominance in the Baltic region. Packed with powerful features like the state-of-the-art ASA radar, Iris-T and Meteor missile capability, electronic warfare superiority, and a revolutionary avionics suite, the Gripen E is not just a fighter jet. It's a war-changing force multiplier. In recent joint exercises with NATO, pilots and observers alike were left stunned at the Gripen E's ability to evade radar detection, jam adversary systems, and engage multiple targets simultaneously at beyond visual range. Its Meteor missile, arguably the best BVR air-to-air missile in the world right now, gives a massive edge over Russian systems, boasting a kill range exceeding 100 kilometers with no escape zone that makes Russian pilots sweat. But perhaps the most shocking detail is how seamlessly the Gripen E integrates advanced tech at a fraction the cost of fifth-generation fighters like the F-35 or Su-57, delivering near fifth-gen performance in a fourth-plus platform. As Russia continues to flex its military muscle near the Baltics, Sweden's silent but deadly message is now airborne and very visible. Swedish engineers didn't just design a jet. They designed a warning, one that flies at Mach 2, turns on a dime, and disappears from enemy radar before they even know they're being hunted. Russia, long comfortable with air superiority along its borders, has now been confronted with a new challenger that can operate from short runways, withstand electronic attacks, and deploy in swarms with network precision. That's where the true terror for Moscow lies. Gripen's data link and sensor fusion capabilities allow it to coordinate attacks, like a flying wolf pack, each aircraft sharing target data, radar imaging, and threat info in real time. It's no longer one jet against one jet. It's Sweden's digital air force against whatever comes its way. During simulated dogfights, Gripen's outmaneuvered legacy Russian aircraft with alarming ease, and in one particularly eyebrow-raising test, a single Gripen E reportedly killed multiple opponents without even being seen. Western allies are taking notice too. Canada, Finland, Brazil, and other countries are already embracing or considering the Gripen as a serious alternative to traditional American or Russian platforms. The reason is simple. The Gripen E doesn't just check the boxes. It blows a checklist out of the sky. It's faster, smarter, more versatile, and significantly cheaper to maintain than other fighters in its class. Russian analysts have called the Gripen E a ghost because of how hard it is to track, and while the Su-57 may boast stealth on paper, the Gripen's superior EW systems often render Russian radar practically blind. Moreover, the operational philosophy behind the Gripen is unique. It was built to thrive in harsh environments, capable of launching from roadways, rearming and refueling in under 10 minutes, and operating with minimal support. This is a serious problem for Russia. In any future confrontation, Sweden could deploy waves of these jets from decentralized locations, striking Russian targets before retreating into forest-covered mobile bases. It's the guerrilla warfare of air combat, and it's exactly the kind of headache the Russian military didn't anticipate. Not since the days of the Cold War has Russia faced such a credible air threat from a non-superpower state. And make no mistake, while Sweden may not have the numbers that Russia does, quality often trumps quantity in the modern battle space. And this jet, the JS-39E Gripen, is all about quality. Combine that with NATO integration, superior pilot training, real-time data sharing with Western command centers, and a doctrine that values survivability over flash, and you begin to see why Russian commanders are alarmed. The shock isn't just about what the Gripen E is. It's about what it represents. A shift in air power away from brute force toward intelligence, adaptability, and precision warfare. Now, the question on everyone's mind is, what happens next? Will Russia attempt to counter with accelerated deployment of its Su-57 fleet? Will they step up electronic warfare efforts to counter the Gripen superiority in jamming? Or will this become another arms race, one where a quiet Nordic country just lit the fuse? Sweden's decision to roll out the Gripen E at this particular moment, amid growing Russian aggression in Eastern Europe, is anything but coincidental. It's strategic, it's bold, and it's terrifyingly effective. What makes the entire situation even more incredible is the cultural contrast. Sweden, known worldwide for neutrality, innovation, and IKEA, now fields one of the deadliest airframes in the European theater. You expect this from the US, maybe China or Russia, but Sweden? That's what has everyone talking. Nobody expected this. Yet here we are. Defense experts from the Pentagon to Brussels are recalibrating scenarios. War games are being rewritten. Russian pilots are being retrained. And somewhere deep in a hangar in Moscow, military engineers are studying every available byte of data on the Gripen, trying to figure out how Sweden managed to leapfrog decades of aerospace evolution and drop a lightning bolt onto the radar screens of the world. As Ukraine continues to pressure Russian forces on the ground and NATO strengthens its eastern flank, the appearance of the Gripen E in this geopolitical landscape is like dropping a queen on the chessboard when your opponent thought you only had pawns. It's powerful, it's decisive, and it's making the Kremlin sweat. In the skies above the Baltics, everything has changed. Russia may have overlooked Sweden before, but now they'll be looking up with a whole new respect. The Gripen E is not just a plane, it's a statement. A statement that says innovation beats intimidation, agility outmaneuvers arrogance, and sometimes the biggest shock of all comes from the smallest corner of the map. Sweden has taken its shot, not with words, but with wings. And the world, especially Russia, will never look at Nordic airspace the same way again. As the dust settles from Sweden's stunning revelation of the JIS-39E Gripen's next-gen capabilities, the ripple effects are just beginning to reach full intensity, and in war rooms from Kaliningrad to Crimea, top Russian brass are scrambling to figure out what just happened and what comes next. Never before has a single aircraft redefined the strategic landscape in such a short amount of time, and with the Gripen now fully operational, Sweden hasn't just added a fighter to its arsenal. It's introduced an unpredictable variable into Russia's tightly controlled military narrative. The Kremlin, notorious for projecting overwhelming force, suddenly finds itself staring down a jet that doesn't follow the rules of conventional engagement. Where Russian jets are heavy, fuel-thirsty, and maintenance-intensive, the Gripen is sleek, agile, low-maintenance, and deadly precise. Russia's reaction has been anything but subtle. Within days of Sweden's unveiling, reports emerge of increased Russian aerial patrols near Gotland and Kaliningrad, with Su-35s and MiG-31s flying aggressive intercept patterns. Clearly a signal. But here's the catch. Sweden didn't flinch. In fact, Gripens were scrambled with stunning speed, locking radars onto Russian aircraft before they even entered the air defense identification zone. Russia had just stepped into a buzzsaw, and the message was loud and clear. Sweden is not to be toyed with. The implications are vast. Intelligence from NATO monitoring stations has confirmed a sudden uptick in Russian military chatter referencing the Ghost, a nickname that's already spreading within Russian Air Force circles for Gripen E due to its elusive radar signature and electronic warfare dominance. Russian pilots now train with new cautionary protocols. Engage only if absolutely necessary, avoid direct lock-ons unless you're of enemy identity, and under no circumstances underestimate the radar silence of incoming bogies. The very psychology of air engagement is shifting in Sweden, a historically neutral power, is the one rewriting the manual. But what makes the situation even more dramatic is that Sweden isn't standing alone. Norway, Finland, Denmark, and the Baltic states are all closely aligning their military strategies, air defense protocols, and data networks with Stockholm, forming what some analysts now refer to as the Scandinavian Shield. It's a defensive wall of advanced air systems, real-time data link coordination, and decentralized deployment, a nightmare for any offensive-minded power. And it's Sweden's Gripen E that's acting as the tip of the spear. This jet is no longer just a national asset. It's a regional force field. Meanwhile, back in Moscow, President Vladimir Putin is said to be furious. Russia had long calculated its military superiority in the Baltics as a guaranteed advantage. Now that assumption is in ruins. Russian defense spending, already stretched by operations in Ukraine and global sanctions, must now pivot to address this unexpected threat. Early indications suggest Russia is fast-tracking upgrades to its own 5th-gen Su-57 fighters, and even considering unfreezing experimental 6th-gen drone projects just to keep up. But the problem isn't just technological, it's doctrinal. Russia's air combat philosophy relies on brute strength, massive payloads, and long-range missile superiority. Sweden's Gripen turns that approach on its head by using stealthy profiles, electronic deception, lightning-fast data relay, and a philosophy of never getting caught in a fair fight. The result? A Russian Air Force that's big on paper, but increasingly ineffective in the face of a smarter, faster, and more adaptable adversary. And as if things couldn't get more tense, U.S. defense officials have begun coordinating with Sweden on deeper integration of Gripen systems into NATO's collective defense grid. Exercises involving U.S. F-35s and Swedish Gripens have shown that the two aircraft, when networked together, form a nearly untouchable hunter-killer team, one built for ambushing adversaries with overwhelming digital superiority. The F-35 acts as a high-tech scout, soaking up data from vast distances, while the Gripen closes in as a silent executioner, delivering Meteor missiles at targets already softened by EW attacks. For Russia, this pairing represents a tactical nightmare, one that would force its aircraft to constantly operate on the defensive, limiting freedom of movement and crippling strategic initiative. And all of this comes at a moment when Russia can at least afford new enemies. With its resources heavily drained by ongoing operations in Ukraine and increasing economic isolation, Moscow finds itself facing a new Nordic threat that didn't even exist a year ago. But the real genius behind the Gripen lies not in its missiles or radar, but in how it empowers a new generation of air combat doctrine. Sweden has trained its pilots not just to fly, but to think agilely, independently, and with maximum autonomy. Every Gripen pilot is trained to operate as both a fighter and a battlefield commander, using onboard AI to analyze threats, prioritize targets, and evade danger without relying on central command. In effect, every Gripen in the sky is a smart missile with a brain and a conscience. It's not just hardware, it's a philosophy, and it's winning. Stories are emerging of Russian pilots encountering Gripens during patrols and losing radar contact within seconds. One moment the Swedish jet is there, the next it's gone, leaving only a burst of electronic interference and a lock-on warning on their dashboard. In simulated engagements, Russian SAM sites were destroyed by Gripens before they even powered up fully. It's a level of operational mastery that Russia did not anticipate, and now it's scrambling to close the gap. Back at home, Swedes have reacted to the Gripen's rise with quiet pride. There are no massive parades or propaganda displays. Just confidence. The kind that comes from knowing you have a weapon so advanced, so capable, that even the biggest bullies in the world think twice before stepping onto your turf. It's a national achievement that goes far beyond defense. The Gripen E have become a symbol of what Sweden stands for. Resilience, intelligence, and the quiet confidence of a country that doesn't shout, but when it speaks, it echoes. Defense commentators across the U.S. are calling this the Swedish shock doctrine. The idea that a smaller nation, with focused innovation and the right strategy, can not only defend itself but flip the global balance of power in its favor. In a world dominated by mega powers and military giants, Sweden just showed that brains can beat brawn, and that innovation still trumps intimidation. Looking ahead, Russia is expected to increase both electronic warfare activities and cyber attacks targeting Swedish infrastructure, hoping to slow Gripen development and deployment. But Sweden's cybersecurity defenses, bolstered by partnerships with NATO and elite tech firms, are no joke. Already, several Russian cyber operations have been thwarted and traced back, putting Moscow in an even tighter PR bind. Meanwhile, Gripens continue to train daily, clocking in flight hours, refining dogfighting tactics, and patrolling Swedish skies with quiet intensity. Every flight is a warning. Every takeoff, a message. And in Kaliningrad, Murmansk, and Moscow, that message is ringing loud. Don't try us. Equals. with Sweden now expected to expand its Gripen fleet and potentially export even more units to regional allies. Russia's strategic planners are being forced to rewrite their assumptions entirely. The old model, where Russia could bully smaller nations through sheer air power and intimidation, is crumbling fast, and the Gripen is leading that collapse. Sweden, once underestimated, is now the benchmark. The Dragon of the North has awoken, not with fire, but with precision missiles, electronic deception, and unshakable resolve. And the world is watching. As Sweden's JS-39 Gripen E continues its meteoric rise in global attention, defense analysts around the world are left scrambling to comprehend how a neutral Nordic nation managed to throw such a thunderous wrench into Russia's long-held air superiority dreams. And as the silent predator continues to rewrite the rules of air dominance, one thing is clear. What began as a quiet military modernization has now erupted into a full-blown geopolitical earthquake, shaking every major defense strategy across Europe, the United States, and most certainly deep inside the war bunkers of Moscow. Because unlike the showy fifth-generation platforms that dominate headlines, the Gripen doesn't need stealth coatings and price tags and hundreds of millions to command respect. It relies instead on adaptability, precision, and operational philosophy that embraces distributed warfare, one that prioritizes survivability in contested zones, one that trains pilots to operate from highways, frozen, airstrips, and remote forest clearings with nothing but a toolbox and a laptop, making it the one fighter in the world that can literally fight and fly in the shadow of chaos. And that is precisely why Russia is nervous. Because while they build an air force based on size and fear, Sweden has engineered one based on speed, resilience, and smart kill networks that don't rely on centralized command structures vulnerable to jamming. And if there's anything Russian generals fear most, it's an enemy that doesn't follow the playbook. And that's what Gripen represents. A wild card with the discipline of a scalpel and the fury of a hornet nest. And now, with Sweden's full NATO membership locked in, the Gripen has seamlessly linked into the alliance's digital warfighting architecture, giving real-time airspace visibility from the Arctic Circle to the Mediterranean, and enabling commanders from Florida to Finland to call on Swedish squadrons like modern-day Spartans, ready to scramble within minutes and rain down meteor missiles from beyond visual range distances with terminal precision, which is precisely why Russian aircraft are being shadowed more aggressively than ever before, often without even knowing it until their warning systems explode with alert tones and they're suddenly staring down a kill signal they can't track or escape. And it's not just Russia that's sweating. The Chinese military has also reportedly begun simulations against Gripen-style threats, aware that Sweden is actively developing enhanced export variants that could end up in the hands of U.S. allies in Asia, including Taiwan, South Korea, and even India, which has shown interest in procuring the Gripen to offset its reliance on aging Russian platforms. And this potential global proliferation of the Swedish fighter could mean the nightmare multiplies for Russia and its partners across the Eastern Bloc and beyond. Because the Gripen doesn't just disrupt, it multiplies, integrating with nearly any Western system, adapting to foreign doctrine and customizing the pilot needs, all while keeping maintenance costs a fraction of what Russian aircraft demand. And that makes it not just a weapon but a revolution, a kind of airborne insurgency against bloated defense projects that cost billions but often sit idle in hangars. And that efficiency terrifies bureaucracies built on outdated muscle memory, because for every F-22 or Su-57 that costs a fortune to fly and maintain, a dozen Gripens can launch, fight, land, refuel from a truck, and launch again, all in the time it takes a Russian bomber to power up its avionics. And now, with Sweden's AI-enhanced mission planning systems rolling out, Gripen pilots are being fed machine-learned flight paths, missile trajectories, and jamming techniques tailored in real time, transforming each sortie into a precision-guided disruption campaign designed to break enemy radar grids and turn contested zones into electronic minefields, and nowhere is this more evident than in the Baltic Sea, where Russian forces have reported multiple instances of phantom lock-ons, believed to be the result of Gripen's electronic warfare suites bouncing ghost signatures across multiple vectors, confusing missile guidance and overwhelming EW defense crews, essentially forcing Russian operators to waste resources targeting illusions, while the real aircraft operate with surgical discretion. And now, Swedish doctrine is evolving into something even more terrifying: coordinated drone-assisted Gripen strikes, where long-range reconnaissance UAVs pass data directly into the fighter's digital brain, allowing the pilot to see what satellites and AWACS can't, and then launch attacks while remaining radio silent, nearly invisible to both radar and electronic tracking, creating kill zones in the sky where Russian aircraft simply disappear from the map with no warning and no witnesses. And this level of lethality is beginning to erode Russian confidence to its core, with reports surfacing of pilots requesting reassignment away from Baltic patrols and northern flight paths, not from direct conflict, but from the psychological strain of knowing a ghost is always near, unseen but deadly, like a digital hunter circling above. And to make matters worse for Russia, its once vaunted Su-57 program remains crippled by production delays, supply chain issues, and underwhelming real-world performance, with only a handful of true fifth-gen units in active service and none yet fielded in numbers that would threaten even a single squadron of Swedish Gripens operating on full war footing. And while the Russian propaganda machine tries to project dominance, the facts paint a darker reality. Sweden has outmaneuvered, outdesigned, and outclassed its adversary without firing a shot, using intelligence, discipline, and precision in ways that brute force could never replicate. And now, as winter approaches and regional exercises ramp up, U.S. commanders stationed in Europe are calling Sweden's Gripen squadrons our first call and last line, the kind of aircraft you want in the air when things get real, not because they're flashy or famous, but because they work every time, in every condition, with every weapon you give them. And in the world of modern warfare, that reliability is golden. It's the kind of edge you can bet a battle on. And if you think Sweden is done, think again, because rumors are swirling of a next-generation Gripen variant already in the pipeline, one that includes stealthier profiles, modular drone wingmen, and full-spectrum cyber warfare capabilities, a true sixth-generation evolution wrapped in the same elegant engineering that made the current model a global phenomenon. And as Russia looks on, rattled, isolated, and increasingly cornered by a tightening ring of capable NATO air assets, the message Sweden has sent to the world is etched into every thunderous takeoff and whispered in every silent radar contact. We are here. We are ready. And if you ever thought the North was quiet, you weren't listening closely enough.